indicate your name for the reporter and the commission?
Royal Usher Street,
What is your address?
3501 Marshall Manor, Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
And you own property at Lake Thompson?
Yes, I do. 154 Westlake Drive.
And how long have you been involved with Lake Thompson?
Well, I'm born in Volga. We lived northwest of Brookings. I went to school in Brookings. High school years, spent quite a bit of time up in Lake Ponset. After I got out of high school, actually about early 60s, I was a mailman on Lake Ponset for a couple of years, went door to door on all of the resorts that was up there. A lot of resorts back then. Purchased a property on Lake Ponset probably about mid-70s, and became a realtor in 1979. In 1980, I realized I couldn't be a realtor and have a place on Lake Ponset. 80, we were going into pretty high interest rates. Business was slow. I needed to work 7 days a week, so I sold my place on the lake. Didn't have another place on the lake until about 12 years ago. Decided we want to have a place on the lake for the grandkids. We bought a place at 152 Westlake Drive. I purchased that in '97, right after the flood. When I purchased it, it had a huge hole worse in the front yard, maybe 6 feet deep, 20, 30 feet in, 10, 15 feet in the cabin. 7 trees were tipped over, patio was in it. And I think they sold it just because they didn't want to put up with that. So we put a lot of work into it.
As a realtor, I would assume you have you sold places for your clients on Lake Ponset?
Probably sold 18 to 20 homes on Lake Ponset.
The question was asked by Mr. Brink here just a few minutes ago as to the percentage of developed land on Lake Ponset. Can you give an accurate estimate of the perimeter of the lake, what percentage of that lake has been developed with homes?
With that last development on the east side, we must be up in that 90-95%.
So roughly 90 to 95% of that lake has been developed.
I would say yes.
And there was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, would you agree or disagree that there's probably 500 to 600 structures on the lake?
I think 600 is close.
As a realtor, you've been involved in the real estate business for the past 30 years.
30 years last month.
And again, you sold properties, or assisted your clients with selling properties and purchasing properties at Lake Ponset.
Correct.
Do you have a knowledge of the real estate market at Lake Ponset?
I have fairly good knowledge of it, yes.
Let's talk about, you indicated that in the 50s you were growing up northwest of Volga there and had contact with Ponset. How would you compare Lake Ponset in the 50s and 60s of what you've observed the past 7 years?
In the 60s, when I worked for Terrace Park and Hall's Milk up there, there was Hillside, Stony Bridge, Ellsville, Fish Haven. Ernie was in Pier 81, and I can't remember the one across the road. Sportsman's Warehouse, Sportsman's House was across the road. There was actually Nancy Ann's, Month Resort, Arlington Beach. That's what was in there in the early 60s. They were all busy. Today, there's probably only about 2 left. In fact, the old Pier 81, which is Fishfield, closed up again this summer. I see that's locked up. The other one quit serving food. Lakefield is probably about the only place left on the lake to eat. They opened up a new bar over in Arlington Beach, which serves a short menu. But that's really about all that's left up there to eat.
Concerning the water quality, can you explain to the Commission your perceptions of water quality at the time that has gone on, 50s, 60s, 70s, including the last 7 years?
Having a place back in the mid-70s filming it back in the mid-70s. I was there for the lake kill in '77, which was unbelievable how many fish died in that lake in '77. Water was very low. Had to put my dock in at that for at least about a year. Had to put the dock in. Hadn't used the lake very much at that period of time. It was very shallow out in front of us. If I had a boat, if I would have been out 200 yards for a boat lift. So they used a boat back then. But then when we bought 12, 13 years ago, the lake was full. And actually probably overfull that first year. And I only had a very short part of sand beach, probably 15 feet. That's all I had of beach. Last year before the lake came up, I have 108 feet of beach out and 90 feet of beach wide. Sand grows weeds like you can't believe. I bought a 4-wheeler and a drag section just to drag that out. And I do mine and 3 of the neighbors. This year I've lost probably about 40 feet of that, 48 feet I think, I've lost of that beach, which I'm glad for because it's underwater. I did put my dock in the dry years, but only because, not to use it, because my end tires were never underneath the water. To get it off the grass so I didn't have to mow around it. I didn't put my boat lift in for 3 years, had my boat in storage for 3 years. And it's a tough time when the water's so low you can't use the lake. We don't get a lot of times with our grandchildren. My grandchildren, my 2 oldest, are now in college. So during that period of time when they should have had good lake enjoyment, there wasn't any. They didn't like to come up because the water was so low. I finally ended up buying a jet ski just to have something for them to play with out there. So I kind of lost some good time with them. And then by the time they get to be up and have seniors at college, they're too busy, they're working, they don't have time to come up anymore. So when you lose 6, 7 years in there, you lose a lot, depending on the age of your grandkids.
Was there also, during the 6, 7 year period, an issue of stench?
I'm sorry?
Was there an issue of stench around the lake during the 6, 7 years when it's been so low?
I sold a cabin right down the road from me, and they sold simply because the water was low. They actually purchased that in 2003. We sold that in 2006. And when we went to sell their place, the sand and the water was out quite a ways. Of course, there were some weeds there, and it was just green out in front of them. There wasn't no water in the lake, it was low. Green, and it smelled, and it was full of weeds. And that's why they sold. They bought up on Lake Compasco. In that process, he lost $20,000 just to get off the lake and get up to Compasco. So that got me thinking what other lakes were doing out there. I couldn't, and of course, Compasco and Madison would be the 2 lakes to look at. I didn't look at Compasco because I don't belong to the Watertown MLS board, so those figures are not available to me. But I did pull the figures for Lake Madison. Almost everything on Madison goes to the Sioux Falls Board of Realtors, so everything's available through computer. I went in the computer and pulled homes that were purchased after 2003 and homes that we sold again prior to 2008. I found 7 homes that fit that criteria. That were purchased after 2003 and sold again prior to 2008 when Ponset was low. I then looked at how many months they were held, and I looked at how many months, what percentage it had increased in price in 2003 whenever they sold it. Divided it out, came out with 1.08% is what Lake Madison was going up per year, per month, which would be 13% a year. For those 4.5 years that I looked at, from 10 to 55 months that I looked at. And at the same time, I have places listed on Lake Ponset, that Anderson's listed. The analysis said we should get 169. We set it for 6 months, we dropped it to 159. We set it the next year, we put it on 149, and we ended up selling it for 145. Took us about a year and a half to sell it. They dropped it like $25,000. They dropped that place, and that isn't the only one. There's 3 or 4 of them who did the same thing. I've got one listed right now that I'm the 3rd realtor on the lake. They were trying to sell it for over 4 years. It started at $239.9. The next realtor listed it for $229.9,